Hello, today I'm going to discuss Meta-selective C-H activation, in which we'll cover the underlying principles and challenges, including two papers that utilise the directing group approach to achieve meta-selectivity within an aromatic system. So what actually is C-H activation? Well, activation is when the properties of a bond are changed so that the reactivity is improved for a desired functionalisation reaction, where then new carbon-to-carbon or heteroatom bonds can be formed. It allows for the assembly of useful synthetics from a relatively unreactive CH bond. It's an extremely useful tool for organic synthesis. Common methods employed to activate CH bonds are activating and deactivating groups and directing groups. Activating and deactivating groups directly change the CH bond properties by electronic effects, which you will see in a bit. A more increasingly used method is the directing group approach. Directing groups do not change the CH bond properties directly, but instead they function as a tether to a transition metal, where it is then brought into the proximity of the CH bond. The tethering, which is just a form of dative bond between the directing group and metal, is a method of increasing effective concentration of the catalytic metal. The directing group is essential for effective catalytic reaction, as the concentration of the metal catalyst is too low to achieve a significant yield and perform a desired activating process. Commonly, selective activation is achieved with use of activating or deactivating groups, whereby electronic properties of substituents allow for faster rates of substitution by electrophiles at certain positions relative to others. Groups that donate electron density or alone pair into the aromatic ring increase electron density at the ortho and para positions relative to the group. These groups activate the positions for an incoming electrophile. On the flip side, groups withdrawing electron density from an aromatic system decrease electron density at the ortho-para positions, and so substitution at meta positions are more favourable. These are deactivating groups. Deactivating groups decrease rates of reaction as they have less electron density relative to benzene. Reactions could proceed very slowly and with low yields. If an aromatic system contains a mixture of activating and deactivating groups, then substitution can be difficult and produce a mixture of regioisomers. Another method to attain higher regioselectivity would be to use protecting groups or sterically bulky groups. Protecting groups have to be installed onto the positions where substitute is not desired, where they block incoming electrophiles. Bulky substituents limit substitution and therefore improve selectivity for positions away from the group. This method of attaining selectivity would be incompatible with complex molecules, due to steric clash with the pre-existing molecular scaffold, such as in drugs. Previous methods discussed have focused on changing the properties of the aromatic system, or using a sort of crude method to direct electrophiles. But what if we were able to directly guide the electrophile to the position where we want substitution, with very high selectivity, without modifying pre-existing substituents on the aromatic ring? Well, in a paper published in 1984 by Tremont, he was able to attain high yields of exclusively ortho-substituted product, using palladium 2+ as an electrophile, and an acetamide substituent as a directing group. Tremont noted that mono or dimethylated products could be reliably produced by changing the solvent conditions, where 2 equivalents of palladium catalyst afforded the di-substituted, and 1 equivalent with quenching afforded mono. In 1987, this new tool was utilised to perform the 2,6-dialkylation and the synthesis of ropivacaine, a local anaesthetic with long-lasting effects and low cardiotoxicity. The cycle begins with the palladium catalyst tethering itself to the lone pair on the carbonyl, where then the pi bond adjacent attacks the electrophilic palladium. The result of the cyclomethylation event allows for a base to remove the proton from the now activated CH bond and return aromaticity to the ring. What follows is the oxidative addition of the alkyl halide and then subsequent reductive elimination. In the reductive elimination step, we then get our desired new carbon-to-carbon bond, releasing the orthomethylated product. To make the process catalytic, silver acetate is required for ligand exchange. The acetate ligand allows for effective oxidative addition of the alkyl halide due to its electron richness. In the previous example, we've seen how tethering the metal to a directing group allowed only the orthomethylated product to be produced in very high selectivity. So could altering the properties such as chain length of the directing group be key to accessing whichever position we desire? 30 years after Tremont's ortho directing group method, A paper published by Professor Jinquan Yu showed that a directing group they had developed allowed for meta-selective functionalization in about 95% of reactions. They found that even when the ring contained trifluoromethyl and methoxy in the ortho and meta positions respectively, olefinations were still achieved in good yields. This showed that regardless of pre-existing electronic bias on the ring, the directing group could overcome it, an extremely useful property of a further functionalization tool. Let's discuss some of the aspects of the directing group. On the backbone of the directing group is an aromatic ring with tertiary butyl substituents para to one another. The group found that the aryl group allowed for the palladium to be held in the same plane as the CH bond, and that without the substituents the reaction didn't proceed at all. It's likely that tertiary butyl prevented free rotation. Despite appearing mundane relative to the rest of the cyclophane, these R3 substituents control how curved the pre-transition state ring is. When R3 is sufficiently bulky, intramolecular ring formation is favoured as per the Thorpe-Ingold effect, where bulky substituents reduce the number of allowed conformations and so is key to achieving meta-selectivity. This can be seen when R3 is sufficiently small, such as hydrogen. The formation of the para-regioisomer is increased due to the lack of steric influence. The group also found that increasing the size of the alkyl chain, para formation decreased and orthosubstitution increased to about 5%. Now for the tether, the sort of prize tackle at the end of the fishing rod, essential for attracting a bite. As nitrogen is sp hybridized, the lone pair is more tightly bound and so only weakly coordinates to the palladium metal. This is a major aspect of the reaction, as it determines the rate at which palladium can disassociate to then go on and catalyse further. If bound too strongly, then rate of reaction lowers and possibly palladium sticks to the tether, further reducing catalyst efficacy. The other major role is the turgid linear mode of end-on coordination by palladium. The cyanyl group ensures palladium points to the meta position for effective CH activation. In 2019, another significant push towards meta-selective directing group templates was achieved by the team of Akar. They devised a meta-directing group that coupled with unactivated internal olefins by implementing a pyrimidine-based biphenyl substituent. You can see that this directing group appears far less complex to that of the group of U's, achieving conformation rigidity that does not rely on a flexible allylic backbone. The pyrimidine tether offers both strong sigma-donating and pi-accepting qualities that the group found to improve the ability of olefins to coordinate to the palladium-2 species and the subsequent 1,2 migratory insertion event. It is notable that this reaction was ineffective with terminal alkenes, and it was concluded this was due to a lack of steric influence during migratory insertion events, giving poor yields and the rise of branch products. Where Professor Yu's directing group was comparatively more complex, Akar puts more emphasis on ligand choice. Akar's far simpler directing group approach still requires the need for a cyclic pre-transition state, but the innate rigidity and planar properties of the biphenyl system reduces any regio inefficiencies associated with a flexible alkyl backbone. Employing a chiral amino acid ligand in the rigid 14-member ring determines this reaction's E-selectivity. Employing a chiral amino acid ligand and the rigid 14-member ring is what determines this reaction's E-selectivity and the exclusive allylic product formation, despite the fact that the styrenyl form is the thermodynamically favoured product. This arises from the conformation set by the Palladicycle, where then ligand-assisted beta hydride occurs. All the mechanistic details that Akar's group determined was by use of computational techniques, and I would really recommend giving it a read as they cover all of the possible conformations and the energetic costs of each one. Akar and his team employed their new directing group on several olefins contained within drugs and relevant molecules with promising results. An example I'd quickly like to point out is the Nero derivative the group chose. I believe it demonstrates how effective this method is, with high regio selectivity despite the presence of two other internal olefins. So why does meta-selectivity matter? Well, it can offer chemists new retrosynthetic pathways. It can reduce the number of synthetic steps and complexity of a synthesis, ultimately saving chemists time, money, and it reduces waste. The biggest bonus is that the directing group can perform selectivity regardless of electronic or steric effects, allowing for post-modification of existing drugs. Some challenges with the directing group approach are They require formation of the cyclic pre-transition state, essentially to point the palladium at the correct bond that you want to functionalise. Waiting for the palladicycle to get the right conformation will lead to longer reaction times for any significant yield. We can see these in the last examples that were 18 or 24-hour reactions. Another challenge with the directing group cyclic state is that it must be fairly rigid to allow for a selective process. We've seen that when hydrogen was on the backbone of the first example, it allowed for para and ortho due to the lack of steric bulk guiding it to the meta position. There's also the potential to lose catalytic potency. If the metal binds too strongly to the directing group, then it can slow down a reaction, or the possibility of losing some of your catalytic metal. Now that's all I've had time for today, but if you want to learn more, you can go on the links to the papers and learn in depth how they crafted each directing group. I hope it wasn't too dull, and thanks for watching.